see, we have been talking about the like Agile and Scrum. We had 2 sessions earlier, so just a quick kind of a map view of this. We talked about introduction to Scrum and how it relates to Agile in the first one. Then we talked about some practical aspects of adopting a Scrum in your team. And then we are now today talking about some of the advanced topics of Scrum. Uh, and we will keep this thing as practical as possible, like not going into too much of theory. Because I feel sometimes when we apply too much of theory, then the practical challenges are kind of left behind and we end up having a process rather than a philosophy or a methodology that helps us deliver faster. So that is why this title, Practical Scrum. Quick introduction for myself. I have been serving teams for quite a long time, working for about like 25 years now. Currently, as a senior vice president of engineering in Paytm. My job currently doesn't require like managing any Scrum team, but just because I'm passionate about this area, I love to do these talks. So just a quick show of hands on the chat. If you can maybe just identify yourself as like if you're a working professional or a student, or and if you are already using Scrum and Agile in your current job. So just please write in the chat itself, and we will be using chat quite a bit during the session. So I would say write down your like if you are a working professional or a student, and using a Scrum or not using a Scrum. So just that intro will help because we come from very different backgrounds. So accordingly, sometimes it helps to just tailor the content. Sorry about this video angle. I don't know why this camera setting is kind of weird. Okay, some ground rules before we start. If you are currently distracted or working on something else along with this, I would encourage you to drop out because if you are not paying attention, then you are not going to learn anything. It would be better that you can maybe do it sometime later, or maybe watch the recording when you have time, because multitasking is something that really doesn't help, particularly when you're trying to learn something. And the second thing is key. Although we will have time towards the end for Q&A. If you have a question, just drop it in the chat box. Third point, if you have an answer for something being discussed, feel free to add it to the chat box. And because I would like it to be a very interactive session. There are challenges of doing it online. So if we are in a room, then it is probably always more interactive. And last point, if you see any typos or anything on the slide deck, forgive me for that. I'm not a PowerPoint person. I prefer whiteboards and just doing. I will usually have just a single slide and just talk the details. Okay, so these are the ground rules. I don't see anyone putting their details on the chat yet. Like if you are a working professional or a student, or if you are currently using Scrum in your job. So just your job title like student or working, and yes, no for using Scrum or not using Scrum. So that will help. Okay, so we will start with. So in the last 2 sessions, just a quick, we will do a recap of what we covered there. But today's agenda, we will talk about the continuous improvement, which is one of the Agile principles that is there, that how the teams continuously improve themselves. We will talk about one of the very important topic of stakeholder management. How do we manage the stakeholders' expectations? And then as we are working through the Scrum, one of the practical challenges that comes is handling ambiguity, unknowns, unplanned work, all those comes up. Then the fourth point we will cover today, that is about how do we scale Scrum. And I would love to spend more time on that part towards the end, and then open discussion towards the end. But as I said, if you have any point to add or questions to ask, use the chat box to chat to do that. I love the comment here on the chat box, carrying 10 years experience. We say we use a Scrum, but we don't. And Ankit, that is very common actually. That is very common that just because teams do the some of the ceremonies or some of the nomenclatures of the Scrum, they're like, okay, we are doing stand-ups, we are doing a backlog grooming, and we are having this sprint planning, and that's why we are agile. And this is something that we had covered in the very first session, that just by doing these ceremonies would not make you agile, and by definition you will not be following the Scrum in the true sense. For that you have to have certain principles applied, and we will talk about those. We will talk about those aspects as well. So in the previous sessions, we talked about what is a backlog grooming, sprint planning, sprint execution, a general overview. First, we start with the backlog, and this is just a recap. And a backlog has a list of stories, and stories are sorted like in by the term by their impact. So they are prioritized. It's not prioritized as in uh, high, medium, low, but actually numbered prioritized. And we will see an example of that today as well. So in the last session, we talked about how do we take a list of items that a product owner wants to do, and how do we convert that into a product backlog. From that product backlog, we covered the sprint planning, that how do we take some of these product backlog stories, whatever is at the top, because we want to deliver the most important things first. We break down into tasks. So product backlog are usually customer facing stories. We break down into tasks. We add some of those stories here, which are maybe a tech debt item, which a product owner might not be tracking. And we add that as a task form. And that kind of creates our sprint. Then during the sprint execution, everybody starts working on that. Every day, the team meets and discuss the progress on those tasks, and the goal is that in this time bound window, like if it is a 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, I prefer a smaller sprint, so 2 weeks, team will meet every day and they will discuss what are the impediments or are the bottlenecks that are coming there, and that is called daily stand up. Daily stand up is not a status update for the manager or for the product owner or for the scrum master. It is for the team to figure out what are the things that are getting delayed and then rally around that to make sure that they get finished. Okay. So, and we had seen examples of some of the sprint dashboards that are useful. So the thing that we haven't talked about is what do we do after the sprint finishes, and by which we mean potentially a shippable product. There are certain things that have been added to the product, and potentially is important because it is not necessary that we always have a shippable product. Okay. And details of that, of course, was covered in the second session. And I think on the YouTube, the video will be like available of the first two sessions. So today we will be talking about the last part, like what do we do at the end of the sprint, and which is called a sprint retrospective or demo. Okay. So let's go back to the basics, the first principle thinking, that we said key agile is a set of principles, and Scrum implements those principles in terms of a framework or a methodology that kind of defines a process. So we said that there are 12 principles. I just picked 5 of them because it's kind of they are most used, so in some sense. And so first we did like we want to do customer backward prioritization. We saw that in action in backlog grooming, that whatever is more important for the customer, we prioritize that first. We empowered to be self-organizing. The team has to be self-organizing. If everything is coming top down, then the team is not self-organizing. And this is one of the reasons why the teams that claim to be following Scrum or Agile as a philosophy, they are not really following it because everything is top down. So, and we saw that backlog grooming has some aspect of it because team has a say in prioritization, but mostly when we go to the sprint planning, all of these come very, very clearly that they collaborate with full transparency. It is clear. We are not maintaining different backlogs for stakeholders, different backlog for the team. It's the same one backlog. And team is delivering in smaller chunks, and they are delivering more often. And that is why we have this concept of a sprint. And then retrospect, learn, and before we have seen in action in some form or the other in the sprint ceremonies that we saw so far. Backlog grooming, sprint planning, we did daily stand up. So today we will see how do we kind of live up to this retrospect, learn and improve, and by going into the how do we retrospect. Okay. While retrospective learning improving is part of like these other activities as well. Like for example, when you're doing a sprint planning, you will know from your past experience that certain estimates were maybe overestimated or underestimated, or certain things were not dependencies were not found correctly. So those are the things that you will know, and that is why sprint planning will have we will retrospect daily stand up. You are learning every day, and then you are kind of planning, working out the details of that. But Scrum, specifically to live to this principle, retrospect, learn, and improve, has a very specific ceremony that is for yes, that's fine, Ankit. We can connect later as well. So retrospective learning and improving is such an important principle that we continue to we have a specific ceremony for that, and that is called a sprint retrospective. It is happening at the end of every sprint. There are two parts to it. In the first part, we usually do a demo, and we show what has been done, and we seek stakeholder feedback. And who is a participant in that? It's mostly product owner driven, while the Scrum Master and team and stakeholders, like everybody is present there to show what has been done and seek feedback. And we do it at the end of the sprint. Why do we do that? Is basically to show progress, that this is what has been implemented. Stakeholders are given to provide feedback. The second part of the sprint retrospective is without the stakeholders, and which is where we celebrate our accomplishments. Like what has been completed, we give thanks to people, we give kudos, and then we go and identify areas of improvement. So some people keep it as two separate meetings. Some people have like a first part we will do this and the stakeholders will leave. Second part we will have where the team Scrum Master kind of facilitates that. Team is there and the product owner, they work to celebrate accomplishments and identify areas of improvement. If you don't celebrate accomplishment, usually the team culture becomes very negative because everybody just like is looking at identify areas of improvement, and it becomes a very negative tone. And we do it at the end of a sprint, but after the demo. Why after the demo? Because once you have got the stakeholder feedback, you will have certain areas of improvement, or you will have certain areas to celebrate, right? And the main learning from here is retrospective is we celebrate success and we learn from failures. The failures don't kind of hinder us. We just learn from it and move on. Okay, so these are the two things that we will do. And like we will now see practically how we will implement this. Questions, please keep adding to the chat box. So, okay. So now we in the last session, we had created this sprint, which had these stories, and this has certain number of points associated with this. This one was a very big story, and we had said we will break it down. But at the end of the sprint, last day, this is the status. Some of these things are partially completed, some are complete. And luckily in this one, there is nothing which was not started, but you can have that as well. And so every day team is meeting and like updating the tasks. Whichever thing has been completely, all the tasks done, that is complete. Anything which is remaining as a task, that story is in partial state. Okay. So this is the view we present to the stakeholders. We are not going into all the details of who is working on what. And then out of these completed stories, we will take either all of them or whatever is possible. We will complete and show it to the stakeholders. This is a working software. So as we know in Agile world, we value working software over documentation. So we don't really show just documentation. We show working software. For example, this number one story, quick single click order, that we had actually started building like we were working on an e-commerce website. So one of the features or one of the stories there was that users should be able to just do a buy now instead of adding to cart and then doing a checkout. So it's a partial, so it can't be demoed. But if the user has items left in the cart, then we want to send them reminders and it is complete. So this can be demoed. So the team decides which stories they will demo, and we seek stakeholders' feedback. We show it like the working copy of them. I don't prefer like doing slides for demos. It should be live demo whenever my teams are presenting. And uh, it is important to time box it. Otherwise, these demos go into like a very long discussion. And the team should insist on stakeholder participation. If the stakeholder is not coming, stakeholder as in like whoever is, it can be your manager, it can be your directors, it can be your leadership, so to say. It can be maybe some partner teams, it can be your customers, depending on you, like whoever is considered as a stakeholder. 4 roles for Scrum Master, Product Owner, the team, and the stakeholder. So the stakeholders have been identified. That's how this backlog was built. The another tip that I have is practical aspect is that don't discuss the reason for delay yet, because we haven't done a retrospective. So we haven't really discussed why things got delayed. So we don't want to discuss that with the stakeholders. We will present that maybe as a separate update. And the third point is when you're doing demos, don't go into a design discussion. Oh, why it was not implemented this way or that way. Those are all good discussions to have, but some stakeholders will have questions about that. But it's better not to spend too much time and focus on functionality that what is being implemented. Take feedback, creates like new stories to address those feedback, and that is the end of the sprint retrospective demos. Usually, the stakeholders have to be trained uh, and when I say train, I mean coached into doing it retrospective correctly, where they are also not really asking like random questions. Oh, where is that story that I had suggested like 5 weeks ago? And that is not a question for a sprint retrospective. That is something that the product owner should handle offline with the stakeholders. Okay, so this is sprint retrospective demo is strictly about stories which were picked up in the last sprint, and we are presenting what was completed, and we will demo it. Okay, so this is 30 to 60 minutes done. Next part of it is we will be looking at the team will now look at key what was completed, what was not completed, and this is purely now we are going to the retrospective part. So team needs more details. So this is the sprint board that we had. And we had said that it is, these are all the tasks that are there. We had broken down these stories into tasks. So these tasks you can see are done, but this one is in progress, like regression, the test modification, this was not completed. So that's why it is partial. And this is also partial because there are certain work that is remaining here, right? This is complete because there's nothing which is everything is in the done state. This is also complete. It's a big story, but it's still, it got completed. And one point thing here, this is the point size, and this is the estimated in hours that the team had estimated just before at the start of the sprint. So the team is also tracking how much estimated time we had said it will take. And this is just for the sprint when we have broken the tasks and how much actually it took. Okay, so team has this complete view in front of them. What we do is we start with the sprint, this dashboard, and give 5 minutes for everyone to think that why certain things happened. Okay, so it's giving a complete view. And again, as we discussed last time, that we sprint dashboard has to be organized based on the stories and not based on like individuals, like, okay, who is working, like developer one is working on this, developer two is working on that, and not like that. But it is stories broken into tasks and what is the status of those tasks. So now the team has a complete view. Some of these things you can see have been marked as red because they have taken more than estimated. So we want team to think why this happened. We can see that some of the top priority stories here, which is number 1 and number 2, they didn't complete. So we want the team to think. that why this thing happened, why something which is more important was not completed, but something which was less important, they were completed, right? Why did we take a story which is like such a huge 120 hours estimate, 21 points, would have been, so these are the kind of questions we will ask. So let's start the retrospective discussion. So when we start the discussion, everyone in the team talks about four things: what went well, and if they want to thank anyone or share kudos with anyone, what could have been better, that in the last sprint, what could have been better, and what are your suggestions for improvement. These four things are recorded. Usually teams just have like a Excel sheet. Some people, some teams, like they are using uh, like Jira for this, some have other tools, but having the core understanding, the crux of it is more important than the tool. So these four things are important. You can do that on a wiki page, you can do that in a Word, and a notepad, Excel, whatever, but focus on these four things with the intent of improving your mechanisms, your processes, instead of blaming people, instead of saying this person didn't do, or this person uh, always underestimates. We will say we have this tendency of underestimating things. So how do we fix that? And you give suggestions. So just complaining doesn't work. You have to give suggestions for improvement. Some of the tips that I have found very useful to trigger a good discussion. Uh, if we have stories which we have finished, we have not finished, and they are higher ranked, so we should be looking at this as to why the team couldn't finish them. The team was aware that this was a higher ranked story, and then why we couldn't swap with a lower ranked story and say, okay, we will put this lower ranked story on hold and complete the higher ranked story, because one of the agile principle is that we do customer backwards prioritization. So when we finish work, we have to be customer backwards, and then good discussion happens. We look at, are there any recurring bottlenecks? You can see here. Yeah, okay, this is regression test modification, testing and deployment. Deployment looks like there is a lot of stuff going on. There are some bottlenecks around testing and deployment. So you can see this from the dashboard itself, and that's a good uh, discussion to have. Uh, are we doing a lot more or less than our estimates? Are we overcommitting or undercommitting on certain things? What are the distractions, unplanned work that came in? Because of that, maybe we couldn't complete stories. What were the dependencies? Maybe the task about migrating all our servers to from one make to another make. We didn't anticipate all our dependencies. So these are some of the questions. And Scrum Masters are typically the ones who are facilitating this. So they encourage the team to think along these lines. At the end, we will come up with a list of suggestions. Like, for example, we clearly see that uh, we are keeping test is a bottleneck, deployment is a bottleneck. So the team will collectively think, and they will come up with a set of action items that what can we do to make our deployments faster? What can we do to lower the cost of like test or regression testing? And those will become your action items from the sprint retrospective. These are the items that will go back into the product backlog. Can anyone help me? What else will go into the product backlog after the end of a sprint retrospective? I just told one, which is whatever items the team comes up with, that, okay, our maybe deployments are very slow and we have to improve that. So that goes into the product backlog. Or if you are maintaining a separate backlog for tech items, then goes into that backlog. What else goes into the backlog after the end of a sprint retrospective? Anyone wants to take a stab at it? Okay, so for in the interest of time, so the non-completed stories, yes, non-completed stories go back to the backlog, and the feedback from the stakeholders goes to the backlog. That, for example, if they said yes, this reminder that you have implemented, very good, but they want certain changes to be done, and those go back to the backlog, and then they are prioritized. So non-completed stories, typically they will be prioritized higher, because you don't want to leave unfinished work, because that is just documentation. We want working software. So I keep encouraging people to think about agile principles when they are making decisions. So why we want to complete the non-completed work? Because we don't want unfinished, like we don't want documentation. We want complete software. And that is why it is. So those three things go back to the backlog, and this whole process repeats. The process that we had started with, backlog grooming, and then sprint planning. And from that, we go into, we break that into tasks. We assign the task to the people. We do the capacity planning for the sprint. And that's how you get to your next sprint. And this cycle repeats, right? This cycle repeats. From here, the sprint retro, you are basically taking things back, all the feedback from the team and from the stakeholders, you are putting it back into the backlog, and then you do backlog grooming, and then this cycle just repeats. So what was our maybe a very complex problem of developing software in a sustainable way, we have broken that into 2-week cycles, and then this cycle just keeps repeating. As long as we are very good at our backlog grooming and sprint planning, daily stand up, then so we have broken the very like maybe 6 months project into two weeks, and then every 2 weeks we are doing a daily stand up. So this is a very good strategy for handling things uh, which are by nature like complicated or ambiguous. You break them down, and that's what we have done. And so, but now that this kind of a thing gives a challenge for the stakeholders. For example, if I am the CTO for my technology stack, and I want to know when certain things will be done, but here we are just talking about every 2 weeks, that what will get delivered in 2 weeks, and that is where we come to the stakeholder management. Because what we have been discussing so far was from the perspective of the team, how the team will do the backlog grooming, how the team will do the sprint planning, how what they will do in the sprint execution. But you know what? They have to keep their customers, their stakeholders happy, because they get paid because of the stakeholders. Okay, so that's a good segue. I hope this is clear so far, that how these things are fitting together. Your backlog grooming, your sprint planning, your daily stand-up, your sprint retrospective, and this cycle repeating. We will talk about the stakeholder management now, which is a very important part of transparency in the work. And any questions, any suggestions so far, please add to the chat box. And if anyone wants to add any points, because I'm not the expert here, people who have been working in the field, if you have any suggestions, inputs, please add that as well. So now, bringing over the stakeholder hat, what do your stakeholders need to know? And this is the typical stakeholder thing I'm saying, because it is varies. So it must be something that if you are the Scrum Master, you have to ask your stakeholders, your customers, your leadership, that what are the things that they need to know. So typically, these are the 5-6 things that I have seen, that they want to know what will be done in like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. Like, what is the roadmap for delivery? And second thing they want to know is the team delivering consistently? Because if you have not been delivering consistently in the last 3 months, then what is their confidence level in your roadmap will be low. But if you have been delivering consistently for the last 3 months, then they will say, yeah, this team is very good. They deliver. So if they are promising that this will be done in 6 months, this probably will be delivered in 6 months. So that is why that's a second question that typically the stakeholders have. The third thing that is there is the team delivering right things. Like, okay, you have a beautiful backlog and you are doing this wonderful sprint planning and daily stand-ups and everybody is busy, but are we delivering the right thing? So how do we track that? And the fourth thing, which I usually have for my teams, is are we getting better in planning and execution? Because if we have certain problems, and those problems always stay and they are not getting better, then we are not really learning and improving. So that is why, as a stakeholder, maybe the stakeholders will want to know that. The last point is, are the people happy? Because if I am for example, VP of engineering, and I'm a stakeholder into the Scrum teams, I want to know, are my people happy? Because if they are not happy and they are delivering a lot of good results, will that sustain? And people who have worked in the Scrum organizations, they can add their perspective. But typically, when people are not happy, the success is short-lived because they will either leave or they will get demotivated. They will they will not basically be as much dedication as is required in the Scrum, etc., etc. So these are some of the common questions. Anyone would like to add anything that they have faced, that what are their stakeholders want to know? Please add that, because this is definitely not uh, kind of a master list. This is something that varies from people to people and from organization to organization. So now we will try to answer some of these questions, and some of the answers might be very subjective, but we will try to use metric or numbers to answer the questions as much as we can, because being data driven always helps. So let's look at the things. What are the metric that what are the metric that we want to track? And people, internet is full of just, I mean, sometimes I feel that there's so much metric because every metric brings overhead. So you have to be careful in selecting which metric that you want to actually track. So the first one that is called is velocity, number of points delivered per sprint. That's called velocity. Why velocity? Because velocity from physics, is basically it's the direction and the the distance covered per unit of time. So that's the concept, that velocity that is there. Then people track how much was the planned work versus unplanned work in every sprint. What is the percentage of tech debt that we are doing? Tech debt, like for example, things like we have to upgrade our Java version or we have to upgrade our Python version. Those are tech debt. Like those typically wouldn't have any sizable impact on the customer, but it is good for the tech team to keep them updated. Sometimes it will help with performance and other things. So leaders or stakeholders want to know how much the team is actually working on product stories versus tech debt. So they want to know that. Lead time versus cycle time, like how much time is it taking when they start a story, uh, how quickly they are able to finish it. And sometimes people have a different version of it. What is the average time, or like what is the mean or median for the story size that we are taking? Because I personally feel that if the team is picking up too many extra large stories, which is like maybe more than 18 points, or teams can define the threshold, that because larger stories have larger risks. So I want to know what is when they're taking in the stories, what is the size, and not average, but median. Then we look at, some teams also look at their bandwidth or capacity per sprint, that how much capacity is available. Again, this is not something which is very common, but teams want to know that, okay, in the last 5 sprints, how much capacity was available? And is it because if the capacity is varying, like number of devs, for example, which are available, or people who are taking unplanned leaves and so on, then you can't predict how much velocity you will have. So there is a long list of things. If you ask me, if you are just starting to implement Scrum, just start with velocity, and we will talk about velocity. Everything else can be like a further improvement, but velocity is the bare minimum metric that we should be tracking. The other two metric, which are not related to how you are developing software, but very important from agile perspective, and these two are sometimes missed in a lot of Scrum like implementing organizations. One is the customer satisfaction. The second one is team satisfaction. And these is not something that you will get from your Scrum board, from your, for example, Jira or whatever software you are using to manage your sprints. You will have to do separately effort to get customer satisfaction and team satisfaction on a regular basis. So these are some of the metric that we have. The list can be very, very long, but remember, every metric that you bring gives you insight, but it also requires some effort to keep track of those metrics. So you always have to look at the ROI part here. So we'll start with velocity, and I'll explain what velocity is, right? So let's say this is our sprint. We planned for 73 in sprint 1, we delivered 65, 90, we delivered 85. Then in the next sprint, something happened and we just took like very few sprint points. Maybe this was the vacation time, or maybe Diwali, where a lot of people were going on vacation and so on, right? And but overall, you see the team is will slowly start towards, like, they will start centering towards the median, which is about 70 points. Like, if, and we are talking about the points delivered. This is the point planned, and this is the delivered, and this is the miss every week and every sprint. And this gives you an idea about, is the team actually overcommitting or undercommitting? Because if this number is growing, then that's a red flag. But let's come back to velocity. So points delivered, median is 70 for the last 5 sprints, and average is also something similar. Usually, uh, these numbers vary, but just the numbers I had put on these one, as to give you an example, they're coming up with fairly close. So what it means is, now the team for the next sprint can fairly say, okay, I will not take more than 70 points. And they will look at the available capacity and then say, yeah, if my capacity is similar to what my previous sprints were, capacity in the number of devs that are available, devs, DBAs, whoever is working. By dev, I mean your team, your builders. If they are that is same, then you should be able to deliver a similar number of, like, median number of points, which is 70. And then the team will target to reduce the miss points, which is like planned versus delivered, to 0. And it will never be 0. I mean, it is rare to see that exactly everything working perfectly. I mean, that's too puritanical in my opinion. So there will always be some slack given, because we want to finish our most important things first. So it means that the least important things might be missed. And with that perspective, it is okay to miss things. But as long as you're not missing your most important ones, it is okay, right? So this gives you so you just plot it, if you prefer graphical view of this, points planned versus point delivered. You can see that it is kind of centering around 70. So going forward, team can take 70 points in their next sprint as their capacity, as their, this is what we will take up, okay? And then they will strive to deliver that. Now the question comes, like, even in this example that we had seen earlier, there were a number of stories which were incomplete. So how do we account for that? Should they be counted as point delivered? Should they be not counted? There are two schools of thought there. One is that, okay, you kind of, if maybe if we feel that 90% of the story is done, then we will just carry forward maybe 10% of the points. Of the story was like 21 points, we will carry forward 2 points. Some people say that no, you shouldn't count anything from that story because it was not delivered. So if that story was 21 points and it was missed and it was not delivered, then you just carry all 21 points to the next sprint. There is no like right or wrong there, but I do feel that teams should look at minimizing their like not finished task. And from that perspective, if you don't count things which were not completed, teams, their points delivered will kind of show less, and that's why I prefer that the whole thing is not counted as delivered. The reason is this, and this is a very good read from on Medium. Uh, and so if you have this effect of almost done piling up, like there are too many things which are in every sprint which are almost done, maybe some part testing is completed, some deployment is pending, something else, some approvals are pending, and you just keep piling up almost done. So the number of, if you just go by this, if you count the almost done, then the team will be happy that I have delivered so many points. But is it delivering any customer value? Any thoughts from the audience? That if my story is not delivered yet because something is remaining, so my points delivered will count it, all the work that was completed, but my customers wouldn't see that benefit. So is that helping the cause of customer? Is that helping the customer? And the answer is no, right? That you are not delivering customer value. You are, so that is why when you count this almost done type of things, which are like there's some part, something which is remaining, then in the points delivered, then you might just be getting a very false number. So that's why I don't prefer counting your undelivered story points into delivered thing. But again, not a matter of debate. Start with one, whichever mechanism you feel kind of the team feels more comfortable with, because Agile is about self-empowering the teams. So they will take that. So velocity is just a way for the teams to bring predictability. That if my bandwidth is constant, similar, somewhat constant, I'll be able to deliver. And bandwidth is number of devs or number of hours that you have. What do we do with this velocity? With this velocity, we will be able to tell the stakeholders that, okay, these number top 1 to 4 5 tasks are done and customer feedback is available. These are work in progress. Maybe this is currently in the current sprint, this is the next sprint, and this will be done in August. So we can tell with certain level of confidence. Usually, if you have like a larger backlog, then but just to fit it on one screen, I have to show it this way. This is work in progress. You can say this will be done. We have not started, but this will be done. And the points which are stories which are further away, we say that this more needs more detailing, and because we haven't really done the sprint backlog grooming for these, so we don't know the story points for these, and how do we come to the story points we covered in the last session. And then the team says we will provide estimate in 2 weeks. This communication is usually done by the product owner because product owner owns the stakeholder communication. So do you see the value of velocity? That with velocity, we can say how much with certain confidence. If you have velocity and if your variance or the miss is very small, then you can, with some confidence, you can say that this will be done in August, this will be done in September, and this will be done in October, and so on. If you have a larger backlog, then it will be kind of, you can build 3 months, 6 months roadmap. And that's the value of velocity and looking at your miss rate. So is it clear so far that how do we come to a roadmap? If we were doing this as a uh, if we're doing this project as a waterfall, and again, not saying that waterfall is bad, or but certain situations waterfall doesn't work as efficiently. Certain situations waterfall works better than agile. So in this case, if we were trying to do it with waterfall, we would have designed all of these things. We would have taken up, which maybe would have spent like 3 months, and then we will have come up with estimates, and we would have, so in 3 months nothing get delivered. But in this case, in first 3 months, we delivered something. We took customer feedback, and we, based on that, we take stakeholder feedback. Based on that, we keep modifying uh, our roadmap. So do you see the contrast? In one methodology, there is like everything has to be spec'd out, requirements written, all the designs complete. Then the coding starts, and maybe for the first 3 months, all you produce are documents, and then you go into coding and then building. And once you deliver the first thing, then maybe customer says, no, this is not what I want. I want something else, right? And it kind of changes. It brings you back to the dashboard. In this one, you start delivering in the maybe first 2 3 weeks itself, and then you constantly change your roadmap based on the feedback, which means that these dates will also change. And that is what we will talk about when we look at how do we manage the ambiguity versus like how do we manage the change, right? Because if stakeholders keep adding new stories here, and if they insist that they should be prioritized much higher, it means that these dates will move. And that is where we have to keep educating our stakeholders that this is what brings us to. So with velocity, with the velocity is what median number of points that we have delivered in previous sprints, we are able to get some estimate. And you can also add like your confidence level back, because like, okay, we will be done in August and our confidence level is 90%, because we have like pretty much broken down these things into detail. The one in September, maybe we have like 70% confidence because there are certain unknowns. The last bucket, like we don't know the estimates yet, so will not be able to give estimate at this point, instead of like giving a fake estimate, which is what that the team should be collaborating in 100% transparency, right? So we are not hiding anything from the stakeholders, which is a very big change, cultural change, if you may. And a lot of Scrum Master and product owners do struggle with. But they should be transparent about the buffers as well. Okay. Now, the second question that the stakeholders want to know, okay, are we delivering the right things? So yes, we said that we are delivering all these things, and these are wonderful, the story is completed. And but are we delivering the right things? So for that, this is something not really part of like Scrum. but that's one technique I have seen to be very useful, that when you are working on any story or feature, you always you track the kind of the impact of that specific story by doing an A/B test. And now we wouldn't be able to go detailed into what is an A/B test, but the rough idea is that you give that particular new feature only to a certain, like maybe 10% of customers, and 90% of the customers see regular feature, and then you dial it up. As you're dialing it up, you will see that is there a difference in the metric that you are tracking. For example, orders. For the customers who saw this quick single click order, was the order rate increasing? And you see that, okay, we had projected 6%, and this was 8%. This was projected 3, this was 2. So stakeholders are being told that based on what we were projecting, are we in line with our impact? Sometimes it will be totally off, and that becomes a point of discussion. And sometimes we will say, yeah, this is we don't have the data yet, so this TBD. But this is one way of measuring the impact. So if you are doing Agile, uh, Scrum, I strongly encourage you to look at how to do the A/B testing, so that whenever you are putting out a new feature, you can measure the impact of that feature by itself. Okay. Along with this, we also track the customer satisfaction, dissatisfaction over time, so that we can say that, okay, by when these features were released, is a satisfaction, dissatisfaction increasing, or by these specific features, what is the desat? So there's a lot of work that the product owner has to do other than maintaining the backlog. So this is one way of answering, are we working on the right things? Are we making the business impact? Because we are very clearly making a business impact. And uh, we talked about, like, we haven't talked about the input and output metric, but roughly the teams should also have this culture of like tracking their metric daily. Like, for example, output metric is an order, but the input metric is what? Like, how many products do you have? How many customers are coming uh, to the site? Uh, when they do a search, how many products are in stock, right? So all of these are metric that your system should be producing, and you as in the team, if not everyone in the team, then at least the scrum master and the product owner, they should be tracking these on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, so that we are clear that we are delivering the right things. It is not that product owner has said, I'm prioritizing this thing, and then after that, when this thing is delivered, nobody cares like what was the impact. We track impact very, very closely. And that is one important thing that I have learned, that and this is not typically not covered as a part of the Scrum trainings. It is not also, if you're going for a certification, maybe they wouldn't even like bother about. But practically speaking, if product owner is able to assess the impact and communicate it up and down to the team, it really helps win trust and confidence. Okay. We have a very like a silent audience today. I don't know, are people like fasting or something that because of that? So because I don't see any interaction happening. So guys, please that kind of use the chat box or unmute yourself. And if it is going too fast, let me know. I can tweak the speed a little bit. Or if it is getting boring, we can talk about something else, like why Surya Kumar Yadav was made captain and not somebody else. Those are more important, like I think interesting topics to discuss.
Assalamualaikum Usman bhai.
Yes, sir. Bataiye.
I had one question. You were mentioning something about A/B testing. What is that exactly? Can you please
Right. So A/B testing, it's called A/B or A/B testing. What we do is in A/B testing is when we are developing a feature, we put it that feature, we don't deploy it to the production for 100% of the customers. We measure that. Okay, we first give it to 10% of the customer, then 20%, maybe 50%. And then we measure okay, how well this feature is actually helping achieve the goal. So that is called A/B testing. And there are frameworks to do that.
Osama, can I give the example? Like you
Yes,
can
sure.
test.
Please
Yeah.
go ahead.
So myself, Wasim, Muhammad. As you can see, the in WhatsApp they are releasing feature like with the feature flags. You have a application installed, but you don't see the search bar. But after some time, you can see search bar, right? The design actually maybe change. You know, at a let's say yesterday the different design was there, but now you open the different design is you can see. Maybe a meta search box is also nowadays they have introduced.
Yeah.
So that is a b testing. They release the flag from the back end, and from the front end you can see that feature directly available to you. So that is a A/B testing. First, they test with the some let's say 10%, 20% user only. If they get a proper feedback like no crashes, no errors, then they will release it to 50%. Then also they will test, and after that they will release it to 100%. Right,
Yeah.
Osama?
Yes, absolutely. Very good example. WhatsApp, they are a very heavy user of A/B testing, and other than they measure the app performance, they measure all these metric basically, the app crashes,
One thing,
and they also measure the user behavior
yeah,
with that
one
testing.
thing, yeah, one thing I wanted to clarify. WhatsApp example, whatever he has given, that's absolutely I understand. But in real time, when you are working in a company and when you are releasing some features, do we have control on the customers who can view and who cannot view? Because customers we never know, right? Like let's say for example, it's an
Right.
e-commerce website. So in that website, we can't control the customer saying like these customers can view this website because we never know who are the customers and
Right.
who will come.
So yeah, I think that's a very good question, because the dev team specifically wouldn't really control, right? So that's why we don't enable it for specific like user A and user B, right? What we tell the A/B testing framework is enable this feature for 10% of random customers. So it will be randomly enabled for, and you can control it by geography, or you can control it by certain user cohort. So all of that is part of the whatever A/B testing framework you are using. For example, Google has for their Android apps. So that's an SDK that is available. So there's a dashboard. You release a feature with a certain feature flag, and then for that feature flag, you say, want to release it for 10% of the random customers, and the framework will choose those customers for you. So you don't really go and enable it for user one, user two, user three like that, but you say, I want it for 10% random customers, or I want it for 10% customers from this cohort, for example, users who are based in India. So that's the A/B testing. It's a very valuable tool for a stakeholder communication, because it kind of stakeholder communication also to the team communication, that features that they have worked on is actually making an impact.
Yeah, got it. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
And what is this SAT and DSAT customer?
Yeah. Customer. So sorry, I think I added a lot of these acronyms here. So satisfaction and dissatisfaction. So these are basically product owners. They do the customer surveys, and they keep getting um, uh, they get reports for that. Similarly, if you if there are other metric which are called, like, you can think of them as an input metric. Like for example, customers who are not placing orders, like they are doing a search, they are adding to the cart, but they are not placing the order. So that becomes like a kind of a metric that should be tracked. Satisfaction, dissatisfaction is absolutely just like, basically it's a way for product owner will randomly reach out to customers, and then as a survey, and then they will ask them to provide the feedback. And of course, you can't reach to 100% of to the customers, but let's say you are reaching out to 5% of the customers, random customers, and asking them questions about how happy they are with the product or the specific feature, and then they will, based on that, the satisfaction and dissatisfaction scores are calculated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. So now we talk about, like, with this one, uh, we also know that things are not always that perfect, as perfect or hunky dory, or always be happy. You will have a lot of ambiguity as you are working on it, on anything. And the goal on this, like next 5 minutes that what we'll talk about is that what is how to handle this, and some of the practical tips that I have seen to be working. Typically, your Scrum team will have two types of ambiguity, like business ambiguity and technical ambiguity. I'm not including the cultural ambiguity or the ambiguity about the job safety and all that, but purely from the Scrum perspective, business ambiguity, what is the impact on business metric? Like, if I launch this feature, will it actually have an impact or not? Will it positively affect customer satisfaction? Will it fit it with the market trend? Market is going, like, competitions are, they are developing certain things, and we are developing certain other things. Which one will win, right? uh, OpenAI is doing everything closed. Meta is saying, I will do everything as open source, right? So what is the market trend here? Which one will win? So there's a lot of business ambiguity. And for that, the product owners do have to do more research. One research is based on data analytics, and the second set of research is based on market and customer research, customer reach out. Otherwise, there is like that is the only way to reduce ambiguity. And sometimes for the smaller things, you might just take a plunge and kind of bet on it. That's also fine. But more data driven, you will be able to use your resources wisely. If it is a technical ambiguity, which is different from business ambiguity, and that is why it is important to kind of separate them. Sometimes there is like they get a crisscross and creating a very big mess of. So it is important to peel out the business ambiguity from technical ambiguity. As a technical person, I feel estimation sometimes it's just too big to estimate. Or which approach should we take? Like technical approach, should I maybe go with this particular design where things are event based, or go with more like synchronous communication? Should I use MySQL versus Cassandra versus SQL Server? So a lot of these questions come up, and then along with that, there's always this risk of regression. Then when we build something new, we might break existing features. So the only way to solve this technical ambiguity is to dive deeper and understand it. So first thing we do is we break into smaller chunks. Like our product owner has come up with a big story. We will break that into smaller chunks, and we will say we will deliver it in parts. The second technique we do is what we call as a spike stories. You can Google that for that word. It's basically when we are not clear which technical approach to take or how to estimate it correctly, we just spend time in the sprint doing a POC or doing some design document, and then no code is typically written except for when it is a POC, but we do a spike story to understand this problem better and decide on the approach. In the last session, we had taken one spike story because when we were doing the sprint planning, it turned out that it's just too complicated in terms of technical approach. So one developer was given a task of coming up with the possible design solutions, options that the team will discuss and take it up in the next sprint. So that is what a spike story is. The third thing is we build a small POC, and then when the proof of concept, when that POC works, then we scale. We kind of make it production ready. We add more features to it. So dive deeper, break things into smaller chunks. That's the way to handle your technical ambiguity in general terms. But if you have a mix of these business and technical ambiguity, it is better to kind of separate them out, have clear owners for that. Okay, who will work on that? Otherwise, things become too ambiguous and people don't take risk. It is always better to take a smaller risk and fail early. So that is I think the key point that should be added here is fail fast. That you want to try out something, just build a smaller version, check it out. If it is working, then scale it. Otherwise, fail fast, move on, do something else, right? Instead of this analysis paralysis is kind of very, very anti-agile, so to say, that people are just like, they're not able to make a decision. But with this framework of breaking into business ambiguity and technical ambiguity, you will be able to make progress and fail fast. The second part is, which is sometimes related to ambiguity, but sometimes it comes as own, like the unplanned disruptions. Your CTO calls and says, I want this new feature to be done because I promised it to a customer. Or product owner comes and says, this customer is asking for this feature very urgently. Or some like fire happens on your production site. Like, I mean, imagine like all of your production servers are starting to shut down. Or they are just too much load. Like Amazon had Prime Day recently, the order volume goes like through the roof. So these are unplanned and sometimes planned disruptions that happen. So how do we handle that? And for this, there's a very simple framework, and usually used by product owners. Scrum masters also should use it. We try to bucketize thing into, is it urgent and is it important, right? And you can have multiple scales like low, medium, high, or for important and urgent. I just have 2 by 2. It keeps it simple, but you can make changes as you want. But things which are important and urgent go in the second quadrant. Things which are important but not urgent are here. Third one is things which are urgent but not important, and things which are not important and not urgent. So this is basically your 1, 2, 3, 4. These are 4 quadrants. It's a very good mental model. I have always find it to be useful, even in situations other than Scrum. So first thing, if you are getting something which is important but not urgent, like there's no really time pressure to deliver it right now, then just like add it to the backlog, prioritize, and move on. You don't have to really do it right away. And that is the key thing that all product owners and the builders and the Scrum Master should learn. Just because somebody is asking something, it doesn't mean that you have to drop everything and work on it. If it is that situation, we'll talk about that. But generally, you just want to add it to the backlog and prioritize based on the stakeholder feedback. They might want it at the top. You negotiate and say where it will go, what is the cost of doing this thing versus other thing. Like, because when you add something, already committed features will get delayed. The second bucket is where it's kind of challenging because it's important and it's also urgent, because maybe there's a $1 million sale deal stuck on it, or maybe there's a compliance issue has come up. So you have to work on it right away. Or maybe your production servers are on fire. And so for that, we typically keep an on-call bandwidth to handle such certain things, right? We associate when we are doing this sprint planning, we had taken up 10% bandwidth and said these people will just work on unplanned tasks, right? And that is exactly why we did that. So if we had total bandwidth, like a 10 developers, we said one developer, or maybe half and half developers will be working on unplanned tasks which are coming on production or from some stakeholders. But we do want to minimize this over time, because if your 10% is becoming 15, 20, then that's a challenge, and that is why we minimize this over time. But keeping an on-call bandwidth just allocated for this, that they will look at some of those unplanned tasks, and how much bandwidth to keep is basically you will know from your historical data. The third bucket is something which is not important but urgent. I mean, this happens a lot, and you'll be surprised because people will come rushing to you and say, just do this thing. It is very important, and I can see that it is urgent, but why it is important? And you understand that, try to understand from the business goals perspective, because everybody thinks what they're asking for is very critical. And this is where product owners have to engage with the stakeholders. To maybe some other team is asking you to do something, or maybe something from the security team is asking you to fix all your SAFe3 bugs, and you say, okay, why it is important? It is not a part of our business goals. And so there's a lot of negotiation that happens. But if you have to take in current sprint, you will move something out, and usually the lowest priority item from the sprint, you take this in. But you want to create a lot of noise about this, that something which is not important, but there is a lot of urgency being created because these things become part of the team culture. Why do we do that? Because we want teams to be fully transparent, and we want them to be self-organizing. We don't want a lot of top-down culture. Last point, something is not important and it is not urgent. What should we do for that? Any suggestions, any ideas? I'm a product owner. I'm getting a feature request, but it is not important. It is not an urgent thing. What should we do with this? Just drop it. I mean, that's if it is not important, if it's not urgent, don't spend time worrying about it. Some people will say add it to the backlog, but yeah, adding to the backlog and then you sprint grooming and doing all the backlog grooming, all of those have cost. So you either add it to the backlog or drop it. But for me, if it is important, if it is not important and not urgent, you just drop it. Like, forget it. You don't want to spend time doing things which are not adding business value. So with this framework, I have seen people are able to handle their unplanned work, unplanned disruptions. And when you are able to manage your unplanned disruptions, only then your delivery will become predictable. Because if you keep taking everything that comes in, you will not be able to complete your sprint, which means your other deliverables will get delayed. So the product owner has to be really, really strong at prioritizing and negotiating. And if product owner needs help, they get help from Scrum Masters who are usually very experienced in communication. So that's how this partnership works. Okay.
Can you give me an example of a use case where a story is urgent but it's not important?
Somebody it happens a lot actually. somebody from the security team, the part of InfoSec, right? They call and they say, Osama, your team has a lot of these Sev 3 and Sev 4 bugs, right? And I want these to be fixed like in the next sprint, in the next month. And I say, why? Because oh, these are security issues, but what is the impact, right? So you will see, you will get these things. Sometimes you will see that some team will come and say, they will say that okay, we have decided to upgrade our infrastructure to use okay, a newer version of Python, so I want you to upgrade as well. And I like, then you will have to say, okay, it is not important, but why are you creating urgency about it, right? What benefits will you get? Like, is it like newer version is fixing any security issues? Is it something that, so a lot of these tasks that come up, uh, sometimes like the team leadership or executives, they do that. They, just because they got some idea, they will feel that it has to be done, but they can't justify the importance of it because it doesn't really drive any metric, any business metrics. So I put that in the bucket of kind of not important but urgent, because there is an urgency, because maybe the head of your product or CEO or COO are asking for this feature. But usually negotiating kind of helps with this thing. So either the leadership person, your customer, your leadership person is able to justify the importance, or they will have to kind of make it agree that this is not urgent, so it will go to the backlog for future
Yeah.
sprint.
So in summary,
This happens a lot. Like, I mean, this third quadrant, 1, 2, 3. So this third quadrant actually happens a lot, more than anything else. So that is
in,
where a lot of negotiation happens.
yeah, in summary, so if I just summarize, you are saying that just to project the work which is not even important to the higher management, we use this third quadrant, right?
No. It is the where the importance is not known or can't be justified. Like, that is where that's we say that it is less important. And importance is basically a function of business goals, right? And every team will have, and this is what we discussed in the last thing, that uh, the backlog grooming starts with establishing goals. So if our goal was to, let's say, increase the order rate and reduce the cost of operations, then somebody is asking me to build a feature which is like not going to increase the order rate, then why will I build that feature? That is like not important. So that is why this third quadrant
Okay, thank you.
is there. A lot of negotiation happens there. I mean, there are no right or wrong. You'll have to sometimes take it in, sometimes you will have to push back. So but knowing which bucket it falls in will help the product owner and the team kind of have a plan to handle these.
So because I was thinking, since we were talking about the unplanned disruptions, so these things we never plan because we never would have predicted these things. So if we are suddenly planning these things, it means that they are coming out of us, our plan. So in that
Right.
case, we need to whatever quadrant we are deciding. So we can't take them as per what management is thinking, what we were supposed to do, because these things are on the spot they are occurring, right? So in that
Right.
case, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, anyway,
Right.
thank you.
Like somebody's asking, for example, you have a roadmap, somebody's asking you to add certain features to it. That's unplanned work. So
Okay, thank you.
you're right. Like it's a like it can be a small item, it can be large item, but it has to be prioritized. Everything has to be prioritized, because the agile principle is that first of all we are transparent. Second, we do customer backwards prioritization, right?
Yeah, I understand, but why I was concerned was because these things are doing the disruption. So if something is doing disruption, how can it be it is unimportant? That's what I was thinking. That's why I had this
No,
question.
disruption is like, I think the term disruption here means disruption to the team. Team is already working on a sprint and somebody wants them to pick up something else. That's what the disruption.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So there's a question from Shivansh. One question from estimation is story point. Does it include QA story points too? Yes, absolutely, because that's what the team is working on, right? And one common mistake that I have seen, people will have one Scrum team which is developers, one Scrum team which is QA. Never do that. Have your developers and QA work in the same sprint, and their total points is what uh, the story point. When we look at the story point, it is basically the total of how the the estimate of what it will take to deliver it, right? Which includes everything, dev and QA. But the teams which kind of have a separate dev team sprint and a separate QA team sprint, they find it very difficult because they don't get that idea of what it takes to completely ship something. So, and I think that's a good question because it kind of leads to the next point that we have, next slide, which is about the scaling Scrum, that where you have a, so far we had been talking about like 8 to 10 builders like dev, QA, DBA, everything working together, like front end, back end. But usually you will have a lot more people than this. So we will talk about cross team collaboration. And there are certain challenges that are there, which is like that is why there is no silver bullet for these things. You will have technical challenges, maybe the way your code base is organized, or the way your services are written, or the way they are deployed, or there are cultural challenges in scaling across teams, that people are used to certain way of communication or decision making. Then there are structural challenges that are there, which is because maybe all the devs report to a dev VP, and there is a QA that reports to all the like a QA ka VP. How do you make things work in that sense? That there are very structural challenges which kind of don't allow uh, this very point that Shivansh asked, that if you have a QA team, and so the QA should be part of the Scrum team, or should there be two separate Scrum teams? Uh, a team for developers, Scrum for developers, or a Scrum team for QA. Similarly, within the devs, there can be backend developers and front end. So I have seen people will have their front end will have one Scrum team, and they will work on certain features. Their backend will have one Scrum team, and then the QA will have. What happens in those cases is your first, the story will come, it will go to the backend developer, they will develop something, it will go to QA, it will go to front end. So it usually what could have been completed working together in maybe 1 or 2 sprints ends up taking a lot more time because these teams are not talking to each other on a daily basis, right? So for that, to solve these kind of problems, because maybe you have like 30 backend developers and 20 front end developers and maybe 10 QAs, and so you end up having like or for all these your 50 people, you 50 60 people, you end up having like 6 teams which are reflecting your reporting hierarchy, because all the devs are reporting to certain ways, so they get, so every manager gets their own Scrum team. So to solve these problems, this is a very famous picture. This is scaling Agile at Spotify. I find it to be very practical. And there are other frameworks for scaling Agile that I wouldn't go into, but you are encouraged to read that. What we do in this mechanism is we have a product owner and we create what they call as a squad. It's basically your Scrum team. They gave it a name as a squad. And in this one, we have front-end developer, back-end developer, QA, whatever requires for this product team to function. And they will own one very clear area of the product. Like if we are talking about, again, and our Amazon-like product, online shopping, then maybe they are responsible for shopping cart, or maybe they are responsible for showing the product details page, right? So how they split this product areas, that is usually there is no, again, silver bullet, and that is where uh, leaders have to come together and form these. But the basic idea is you have a product owner who has and the product owner gets a dedicated set of resources to work with, and these people might be reporting to different people, and this is what we call as the chapter. Like in this one, so there are 4 squads here. These 4 squads together, these we club them together, we call them a tribe. These namings are not different. You can call it like Scrum, you can call it like a super Scrum team. So these 4 things related to, because they're related together, they are called a tribe. And you will have maybe a single Scrum master for this, a single Scrum master for this. And that's how you have scaled from 1 Scrum team to maybe 8 Scrum teams at this point. And each team, each squad has its own very fixed charter that this is what they will work on. Ownership becomes very important. And if when the ownership is not clear, then product owners and Scrum Master, they work together to resolve this. Now, people who are, for example, reporting into, let's say, QA director, they all, or somebody reporting into a backend VP or a director, they all, this is called a chapter, but this is more like a virtual thing because these people report to a single manager. They kind of maintain certain level of affinity. They will share certain best practices and so on, because there are certain values in enforcing certain standards. For example, in the way you write code or the way you set up your code packages and so on, right? So squad arrange as tribe, and these tribe kind of can scale as you build, and you get much bigger team. You can add another tribe. Each tribe has their scrum master, and they handle maybe between 1 to 4 squads. Squad members might be reporting to somebody else because they don't report to product owner, so they might report to somebody else. That thing is basically the reporting structure. That's called a chapter. uh, don't get hung up on the name. You name it the way you want, but the overall structure is this: is squad has every member required to make things work for this product owner, whether it's back end, front end, QA. Everybody works here, right? Then this is another extended concept that I will talk about, which is called a guild. Let's park it for a moment. But is this picture becoming like showing any value to you? Versus if we had the alternate view where maybe there are 10 managers, so you get like 10 teams. One manager for, like, there are three managers for backend, so you get like three backend Scrum teams. You have two managers for front end, so that you get like two front end teams, and you have two managers for QA, so you have like two QA teams. So you get like total 7, for example, uh, different Scrum teams, and then they collaborate to deliver things. So that is one model which I have not shown on the screen here, but you can visualize that because that's also very common in the industry. And it has a lot of drawbacks, in my opinion. And don't take my opinion for what it is. Do your own research. Versus this model, which is you create these again 8 to 12 member squads, and these squads are organized into tribes, and then the tribes are just focused on one area of the product. Yep. So so this is basically that's how you kind of scale the agile. We also kind of build this concept of a guild, which is we have if, let's say, a lot of people are interested in machine learning, and then you kind of create a virtual team across these tribes and things, which is to share and increase the knowledge of a specific topic. That's not really related to agile or Scrum, but it's one way of like sharing knowledge. But anyway, so this is how you scale agile, and this works quite well. But again, you have to solve for the technical, cultural, and structural changes. Uh, okay. Any questions? Any thoughts, suggestions so far? Shivans, did I answer your question about QA story points and why it is important to include QA story points?
Yes, Osama.
Yeah, thanks. Because the definition of done includes QA work, right? So that is why it is important to include it.
Right, Osama. Thank you.
Okay.
This is a, I think, a matrix team structure, right?
Yes, very similar to that. But I think in the matrix structure, this concept of product owner and a Scrum master, that is usually not clear. So that is why uh, we don't call it really matrix structure. But yeah, because see, in the Scrum world, reporting manager and that hierarchy is not important because the teams are considered self-sustaining. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So if there are no more questions, we can stop here. If we can do a follow-up session to have if people have more questions. There's a WhatsApp group also that enabled by MFIRD, so you can join that WhatsApp group and to have like better, more like learning from each other. It's essentially just learning from each other. So again, thank you MFIRD and Saif Abrar for scheduling these sessions. And see, the goal is not to one person comes and presents. The more goal is to just share the learnings. So if any one of you wants to share something on this topic or any other topic, reach out to Saif Bhai, and we will be. I think we'll be happy to host those sessions for learning as well. So with that, we have come to the end of our 3-part session. After this, there are, if people are interested, we can. There are certain specific workshops which are specifically for product owners or for Scrum Masters. So people who are interested in becoming a product owner or a Scrum Master, we can have like a follow-up discussions on those. Very, very focused on how to be successful as a product owner or as a Scrum Master. Okay.
I have one question. If
Sure, Wasim.
Yeah, so in Scrum like framework, how to manage scope creep? I mean, the team is working with the like time and material base with the client. So how to manage the scope creep and how to
Right.
identify like this is a scope creep?
Right. So I'll go back to here, this screen for, because I'll be referring to this. See, the first thing is one of the basic agile philosophy fundamentals that we value uh, happy customers over contracts, right? So if you have a very contract driven nature of the work, where something has been already written, okay, this is the exact scope of the work, this is the which is typically happens in a like a consulting kind of an organization, for example, Infosys and TCS, if they are working on with a very hard contract, then you should evaluate if a Scrum is right for you. Because Scrum by nature encourages people to come up with alternates, right? So that's the first thing. So if you have a client who is very, very stringent on, this is the exact scope of work I have written, you have to just implement this and nothing more. So then Agile, or maybe you will have to make a lot of changes to the way you implement your own version of Scrum to make sure that you are not exceeding those budget numbers. But if you decide to implement Scrum, right? And just to make sure I'm clear on the terminology, Agile, you can still be Agile even if you're not implementing Scrum. You can have your own version of Scrum. You can call it Wasim Scrum, right? And come up with your own methodology, your own mechanisms. But the key thing is that whenever you talk about change management, it is very important to be clear, okay, why the change is needed and what is the benefit. And it's a very common misconception in terms of Scrum, specifically because it encourages retrospective and it encourages feedback and it changes the product backlog, that any change is welcome. And that is not the case. Whenever we have a change suggested by the team or by the stakeholder or by the customer, we have to go by this kind of some sort of a prioritization framework. And the one which I suggested to you, like very simple, important versus urgent. There are many others, but essentially you will say, will it help the customers? Will it improve my customer satisfaction? Will it improve my business metric? For example, if you are building an e-commerce site, it is number of orders or number of daily active users that you have. So if the change that is being suggested is not going to help with any of those, like it's not going to help the customer, it is not going to help with the business metric, it is not going to help with the team satisfaction, the team like team health metric, then you will say, why should I take the change? And that is where we say that every change is welcome. That is not right. Every change is welcome if it helps achieve the stated goals. So the moment you change the perspective, then you will say Scrum also like pushes back on changes, and that is how you will manage your changes. Like if you have a customer who is willing to maybe renegotiate certain things because they are suggesting a change, then you will look at, is that change really important? And then you will present that if we take this change, the cost will increase by this much. And if we don't implement this change, so you kind of always collaborate with full transparency rather than gaming the system and trying to get things done maybe by hiding the cost or hiding the effort part, or maybe lowering the quality on certain things. So first of all, choose if Agile or the Scrum is the right framework for you. If not, come up with your own framework. The second point, whenever a change comes, if you are using agile philosophy, Scrum as a methodology, then you are uh, look at the change and say, is it helping with my business goals? If it's not helping with my business goals or customer satisfaction goals or team satisfaction goals, don't take that change. Push it off. There's Imtiaz is saying that no audio. Are others able to hear me?
Yeah, able to hear.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Murtaza said it very correctly. Changes should be outcome oriented. Yes, if you're taking a change, it has to be like tied to some outcome. That this is the goal that we will drive with that. Very well said.
I heard from my leaders that
Okay.
no change should be allowed without a value. So there should be a value or an outcome. Then only we should go ahead with any change.
And that is one of the key principles of backlog grooming that's there. When we add something to the backlog, the priority is decided based on the impact it creates. And if the impact is not clear, then you go back to this one, and you can have, the product owner has to do more research that what is the business impact created by this specific change. So Wasim, I hope I answered the question that not every change in a Scrum is welcome. Change has to be justified. And that's how you
Yeah,
manage your budget sort, right?
yeah. Thanks, Osama.
Okay. So with this, we are at 12:30 sharp. So at the dot, we can finish this. Please join the WhatsApp group if there are further questions. There are other experts on that group as well. They will be able to help answer that question better than me. So thank you very much once again, and wish you all the best.
Jazakallah khair, Osama bhai. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
for joining.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah, Jazakallah. Thank you.
Thank
This
you,
week,
everyone. Thank you, Osama, and thank you, Chef. Bye.
most welcome.